feeling it. Okay. Oh, well, there we go.
Yeah, that was quick. I don't know what happened there.
That was really quick. Okay. Hello to all the listeners who are joining into the Trippin' Thompson podcast and hosted by yours truly, the husband and wife team, which is
Victor.
and Brikkelle.
Yep.
All right, we're raring to go and excited to continue the conversation from our last episode that we introduced quiet quitting. Also, a terminology that's used is the great detachment, and we covered some good ground. I think good foundation. Would you say, Victor, in the last episode?
I think so. I mean, I think we talked a little bit about the the whys that people quiet quit, and so we're happy to start talking about some of the impacts that these whys have on you, both for our employees as well as managers and organizations. And then later we'll talk a little bit about some of the strategies. Sound good?
Sounds great. Yeah, I'm excited. I think there's a lot to talk about in this space. So, yeah, let's hit it.
Okay. Well, I mean, I've been covering kind of the employee side of things. And so from that side, when we think about quiet quitting or, the great detachment, whichever way we want to think about it, there are 5 different impacts that I want to, call out. There's mindset or the mental, physical, emotional health that is impacted for an individual. The skill and career development that you may be experiencing or not experiencing, your networking or your network and connections that you have both inside the workplace and outside the workplace. Then there is the personal life, right? The work life boundaries. I think last time I used balance, but boundaries is another way to think of it. There's different ways to think of that construct, since work and life tend to blur together. And then the last one, or the 5th one, is productivity. And so just kind of I just wanted to introduce the 5, but then let me just say a little bit about when we talk about them. So when I talk about like your health, all 3 aspects to me are important. Actually, there's 4 aspects if we include spiritual health: the mental, the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual health. And they can all be impacted when we think about quiet quitting. So it could be a pro or it could be a con in some people's cases, but a lot of what happens is that there's a potential for burnout and increased stress. Certainly it can also decrease burnout and stress depending upon how you handle it. And then it also is a time just to prioritize your own self-care. Right. So one of the impacts is that my self-care is going to be impacted regardless of whether or not it's impacted positively or negatively, or just there's like a whirlwind of things happening as I do start to quiet quit, or if I experience other people quiet quitting in the workplace. And you can jump in and like if you have something you want to say, Brikkelle, you can just jump in. The second one I was going to talk about was the skill and career development. So if you can imagine when you start removing yourself from doing more in the workplace, it also impacts your ability to be able to learn new things, right? To be able to explore the passions that you have. And it could ultimately lead to like career stagnation if you think that like I'm not really trying to advance at that point, and so my career can start to just kind of stay stale. It can also mean that I miss out on opportunities, promotions, raises, or even other opportunities outside of my own organization where job opportunities come along. But because of some of that mindset that I'm bringing along from the first thing I brought up, oftentimes that will show up as being pretty obvious to somebody externally, is that, hey, you don't really seem engaged, you don't really seem motivated to take on new tasks. And so it can kind of dull you to being able to take on new tasks as well.
You
Uh,
know, as you're speaking, I want to interject here and share that these are all connected, and they're not necessarily independent of one
mhm,
another, and that an individual, of the 5 that you listed may be thinking, "Oh, there's maybe only one that applies to me." Could be all 5.
mhm,
And you introduce the notion about work-life boundaries, and yes, we should all have them, and do a self check to make sure that everybody is paying attention to yourselves. And then, you talked about the self care, and as people are experiencing more submersion into quiet quitting, the likelihood of doing self care starts to become further filed back in your brain to think about, you know, um, I am in a space where I'm not thinking clearly, I'm not operating at my best, and so self care is definitely not at the forefront, and so that starts to
mhm,
really wane. So I wanted to share and think about the connectivity, and then as those things are happening, it's almost impossible to think clearly, and so having resources available, which we'll get into, is really, really important. But just pay attention that, as you're talking and sharing these things, that, there is stickiness to all of these things that have impact on individuals. So
mhm,
just wanted to
mhm.
share that thought.
No, I agree that that is very, very true, that you can't really separate any of these in
Mhm.
many regards. They're just all areas that we should be aware of, I think, and because they're gonna be impacted. And like I said before, when we talk about impacts, we intentionally we stayed away from trying to say it's going to be a positive impact or it's going to be a negative impact, because depending upon who you are, it might show up differently.
Mhm.
You might actually like really strengthen your physical health, as an example, because you might decide, hey, part of my now like work life boundary is I'm going to make sure I get out and I get exercise. That's just
Mhm.
going to be something that I do. But at the same time, it might impact your mental health or your career development, because you're not engaged in the workplace in the way you want. And so it could have a positive effect on one end, it could have a negative effect on another. And so it's
100%.
just important to recognize that these are all just areas that you should be looking into and thinking about when we're talking about quiet quitting.
And
Do,
those polarities can feel uh, really confusing, in the sense that you're putting effort towards something that you're believing should be benefiting you in some way, and then there's something else that might be dragging you differently, and that can create great confusion for individuals. So yeah, I thought those examples were really good.
Yeah, that's true. And one of the third area that I talked about, the network and connection, I think is one of the areas where it can you can start to notice it
Mhm.
more. I mean, we'll get
Say
into the
more
fact
about that.
that, well, I mean, because what happens is that we tend to build our connections and our network and things like that. And when we are active in the workplace, we tend to, have a pretty vibrant network.
Mhm.
And we know, we've learned about what's going on in our workspace. We have like, even if you don't have like friends per se in the workplace, you're engaging with people. And when you notice that you are not engaging with people, that can start to give you a clue as to, hey, something's happening. right? And by the same token, when you see others and they have started to pull themselves away from engaging, somebody who used to always like corner you at the water cooler, or we don't really have water coolers anymore at work, but um and how like grab you and talk to you, or just see
No
how you
grabbing in the workplace.
no
No
grabbing
grabbing.
either. Yeah, no. So anyway, all my language aside, right? What happens is all of a sudden that person doesn't show up. They don't, they're not participating, and those can be signs that that's what's happening for someone like that. And when we start removing ourselves from our networks, and not engaging or connecting, then it can actually harm our own reputation. People start to say, well, you know what? I don't know if we would really want to recommend Victor for this. Or on the flip side, they don't even think about me because I haven't been hanging out. Right. So I'm
Mhm.
not there. I'm not present. So they don't know. And those issues are definitely things to think about, because you're just being perceived. There's this risk. You're being perceived as being disengaged or unmotivated, and therefore people start avoiding you as well,
Mhm.
and not offering you those opportunities.
And let's put an exclamation point on that one a little bit, in the sense that, for individuals that are working remotely or hybrid, and your physical presence in the office setting is lessened, and you're an individual that is experiencing quiet quitting, the magnification of that, how it's compounded, that one, your engagement is waning, but also your physicalness for others to even be aware that you're on the radar, is depleted. And so how much more that compounds individuals that are in that type of a work structure.
Yes, absolutely. And it is. I mean, as in some cases, we talked last time about, in some cases the remote is seen as a positive for some people. They like
Mhm.
the remoteness. Other people see the remote as a negative, that it's a struggle for them. And so how you are managing that component of your job, if you are now in a hybrid situation or remote situation, though, that can in and of itself have a cause effect in this situation, and show up and manifest in these other impact areas that we've been talking about.
Mhm.
And skipping to the fifth one then, because I think it makes sense based on what we just talked about, the productivity of both the individual as well as even within teams. The productivity can be challenged. We may it may be reduced. In some cases it actually, your productivity doing the specific minimal task may actually be fine. Nobody may notice it. It's just simply that you are now no longer going above and beyond what you would normally do. And that
Mhm.
really can be part of your coping mechanism, right? I will give 100% to, these three tasks, and I'm going to give 0% to trying to actually be strategic, or
Yeah.
come up with new ideas and things like that. And so while your productivity may seem like it's fine to somebody on the outside, it really is like being minimalized.
It
Which,
is, and people typically will default to the space that they're most comfortable in, the space that maybe they still have passion around, or is of interest, or something that fuels them in some degree. And so that could be an indication, if you recognize that, gosh, I'm putting a lot of effort and energy into this aspect of my work, but other things are going ignored. What's that about? That could be an early signal for you,
mhm,
that you're having some form of impact.
mhm. As is just the blur in your work life boundaries. And again, I would stress that this can be both positive and negative, right?
Mm,
And you can it can help you define your work life boundaries, but you may over define in a way where you give less than you really intend to give in the workplace, and you start to do things in your personal space that maybe are counterproductive in some cases, right? That's not true for everyone, but it's true for some that you know that becomes a challenge for them. Is okay, how do I manage what's going on in my personal life? We're actually having a conversation about there's certain people who aren't necessarily impacted right now by some of the um, you know economic shifts and changes within our country,
mhm,
and they continue to do the same things they were always doing, but it was like they were doing things that may not have been positively impacting them in their personal lives anyway. And now, by kind of creating this artificial space for them where they feel safe and secure, they really haven't gone above and beyond trying to challenge and see what is the right work life boundary for me. Where
mhm.
can I actually, be most satisfied and effective?
Yeah, absolutely. Did that cover the full scope of the 5 for the employee?
That was
Yeah,
the 5. Yeah, we talked about, the mindset part, physical, emotional, mental, the skill and career development, the network and connection, the work life boundaries and productivity. So those are
yeah, awesome, and then y I'll layer in here notes I have around the leadership part of it, as well as organization and the impact in that area. So, thinking about leadership, that leaders, when you have team members, that are moving into quiet quitting or they're fully submerged into it, it can be very challenging, if impossible, to motivate your team and to find ways to get individuals engaged, and you will see a decline in morale happening, and unfortunately that can become contagious very, very quickly.
right.
So it's something that as a leader, you don't have a choice to shy away from. You've got to step into this and figure it out, isolate it, understand, who it is that you need to be talking to or connecting with, and move quickly to have those conversations and start working towards some sort of a solution. The other piece with leadership is that there's going to be an increase in turnover, and then retaining and even possibly attracting quality talent is going to be difficult. Now, this might be a time where there might be turnover happening where it is positive attrition, that is what we would call it. And that's where individuals that are leaving that we don't feel regrettable that they have departed. But negative attrition, or regrettable leaves are the ones that are most concerning. And so, as a leader, ensuring that you're protecting around that, not only for your team, for you, but for the organization. That's important that we're keeping these individuals on board. And then talking about the organization, there's both short term and long term impacts that can occur. And when we think about short term, there's an increase in absenteeism. There's a decline in team collaboration and communication. And gosh, when those things are happening, we are sacrificing services and product. We're sacrificing customer relationships, customer satisfaction. We could even be falling into quality issues. And then with the communication side of it, people aren't informed or in on things. We might not be getting a heads up that there's something pretty big around the corner that we need to be aware of. So these are really critical things. Again, as an organization, it's not just impacting you as a leader, it's impacting the organization. But as a leader, you have a responsibility to do your part and make sure that you're helping steer this in a very favorable direction. And then thinking about on the long-term side of it, that with having detached employees, this can be damaging to your employer brand. as the retention starts to increase, or that job postings linger out there for a longer period of time, and that's noticed, like, huh, why are you not filling these roles, what's going on? Or they might even see who you hired and start to question some of those things, and recognize that there is difficulties happening within the organization. The other part of it is potential financial losses. So, with that, because we're experiencing disconnectedness, a lack of communication, a lack of effort being put forward, productivity does decline, which also can impact our quality. It can impact our creativity and our innovation. All of these things are direct indicators into financial impact for the organization. And that wraps up, I think, our impact pieces of it. But Victor, what are your thoughts of anything you want to add in with the leadership or organization levels?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back real quick to, one, talk about, you talked about absenteeism, and there's also the construct of presenteeism, people
Mhm,
who are, present at work. And this is really kind of what quiet quitting is all about, is you're present, but you're not really engaged. You're not really present. So the drain on organizational resources is there, and it creates as to tie it to the financial impact. It long term it does have a financial impact. The overall quality of things may be compromised. Your customer service might be impacted in a way where customers don't feel as secure about the work that's being done or the responses that they're given. And then the other thing I was going to bring up is in regard to turnover. That even when you're having positive turnover, sometimes the impact of the whole team can be, you have to watch as a leader,
mhm.
because there could have been relationships and things like that formed. Remember, we talked about people being engaged in the workplace. So when, even if the person isn't super productive sometimes, or maybe they weren't the greatest fit, it's not as if everyone in the workplace is clamoring to see them go. They may be clamoring to see if they can be changed, if they can
Mhm.
become more productive. And then when they leave, it takes, you know, some energy out of the group. And you have to replace that energy with something, with greater energy that can actually ignite the team and ignite them to be more excited about the work that's being done. So those were a couple of things that I was going to bring up.
Yeah, with the presenteeism, so I have a funny little story. There was an employee, this was a while back, that was double dipping in their career. So worked for company, and then also worked for another company. Now, this individual had a sales role, and so not being in the office because they're customer facing and out on the road. So they were present in the sense of doing their job, filling out the reports, keeping up with all of the right things, if you will. However, their sales were starting to decline, and there was a customer that ended up calling in and questioning something that they thought was a little suspicious, that somebody within their company received a call from this sales rep who was at that point in time for that call representing the other company to try and make a sale into the same customer. That's the only way we found out about it. So
Mhm.
the individual's present, but completely detached from the organization, and was whatever, feeling inspired or motivated to do maybe this other line of work, or just wanted to ensure that the income was still flowing. So it can be very deceiving that people can be present, but they could be completely just absent.
Mhm. No, that is absolutely true. I mean, I actually was coaching someone who admitted that, like, when COVID hit, they were had to work at home, and all of a sudden they saw another job that they also are interested in, and that one was work at home. So they just worked both jobs at home. And so they were working two full-time jobs, but they weren't putting in full-time work. I mean, that's pretty clear. And so what they were doing was they were draining both organizations, actually, when you think about it, because you're not giving your all to either one of them. I know it feels like we can sometimes that we can do those things, but it is difficult, I would say, to really be engaged that way. Um, so what can we do about this? Like, what strategies are there? I guess is the way to, for us to think about this.
Mhm.
And I mean, there are numerous ways I think that people can address it, but it's about being able to recognize what kinds of things might work for you.
Mhm.
And and it starts with just recognizing. So as we've been talking about the impacts, right? It's like you first got to know it. When I first moved to the Twin Cities, I actually was involved. I played a lot of softball, and one of the groups that I got involved with was I met some friends from Alcoholics Anonymous, and they started an AA group, and um, it was a AA softball league. I don't know if it's still going. However, the number one step I found in AA is you first have to admit that you are an alcoholic,
Mhm.
and that's the same thing would be true here, right? If you
Yeah.
are if you are quiet quitting, or if you have kind of disengaged from the workplace,
Mhm.
the recognition that you have done that is the first step. It's
Right.
and if someone else is doing it, they have to, right? So that recognition becomes important in order for you to start dealing with it. Otherwise, you have challenges. Once or were you going to say something?
Yeah, that without acknowledging it and being honest with yourself first is that you're keeping yourself in this place where it's just a continuous swirl. And that can certainly lead to different types of impact on your emotional, physical, mental health and well-being. And it can also keep you trapped in the mindset that there's no escaping. So you're not releasing yourself to acknowledge that this exists. And so now that this exists, what do I want to do about it? That's so freeing to be able to now label it and look at what is it do I want to do about it? There's multiple pathways to approach what the situation is that's in front of you, but there's one pathway to get to kind of that fanning of approaches, which is the admission piece.
Hmm. That's right. And once you've gotten there, you do need what I would say are like self-care or coping mechanisms along the way. Just because you recognize it now doesn't mean that boom, I'm going to stop.
Right.
And because there are things that are going on for you. So you need to do some things. And one thing that I talk about a lot is mindfulness. And some people say, meditation or prayer is another way to think of it. But what it is trying to find a way to feel or appreciate self and create kind of a centeredness that we might lose otherwise, because then we can think a lot clearer once we get to that point.
Mhm.
And things that, in addition to that, help are things like maintaining some level of physical activity or healthy routine, because, regardless of, I'm not saying you have to go pump iron and work out like 3 hours a day or anything like that, but just getting up and walking for 10 minutes can be super positive for you. In
Yeah.
fact, on your if anybody has Apple Watches, there's this little thing where it tells you every once in a while, time to stand up, right? I laugh sometimes because I'm already standing up when it tells me that, but it's
Right,
okay.
right.
But what it's trying to say is I need to get up and move, right? I need to, not just be in the same space all the time. And that when you move your space, you get a new perspective, right? No matter what you do, if you get up and you move around, or even if you just stand up, you see things differently than you were seeing them when you were sitting down.
Plus, you can get your Apple Watch then to say, "You did it!" with a big exclamation point. So
Yeah.
there's a little shot of dopamine for you, like, "Ooh, I achieved something. Good job."
Yes. Yes. It
Mhm.
does actually give you
It
that.
does.
And if you
Yeah.
do that enough times during the day, it gives you like this big green thing and it says, "Ooh, look at that. You
Yep.
actually achieved your daily goal," which is good, right? I mean, that helps with the mindfulness. The other thing that has to happen, which I will admit I'm guilty of, is that you need to seek support from others, from friends and families, and or even a therapist. Even, you have to go outside of yourself. I mean, it's very easy, I think, to want to stay inside yourself and say, "Hey,
In
what?
your head. Get out of your head.
Yes, get out of your head. Yes, that's true. Get
Okay.
out of your head and open yourself up to others' perspectives as well. I mean, you can even do this by even just going online and Googling, right? I mean, Google has AI now, right? So you can just like ask, it'll pull perspectives for you and help you think about things differently. Without that support, though, what you're doing is you're trapping yourself to your own thoughts, and only your own thoughts. So those are things that can help you now that I've recognized it, how do I kind of keep myself, like my self care up and maybe improve it? Because as I do that, then I can start to explore, my different options, right? I mean, because this kind of comes down to, I mean, we laughed as we were preparing for this because there's this song, "Should I Stay or Should I Go?" It's like that really becomes the kind of the thought of the day when it comes to, quiet quitting. And I say, well, where am I going to go from here? It's like, should I stay where I am, or do I need to go somewhere else? And that doesn't necessarily mean I need to go to a new organization. Sometimes it can just mean I need to go to a new job within the organization, or I need to, take on a different responsibility. Brikkelle, you brought up this whole thing about, hey, we tend to gravitate toward things we really enjoy doing. And maybe part of what has happened is that your job actually has stagnated you as opposed to you stagnating in your job. So that all of a sudden it's like, I needed a new challenge. So how do I get that new challenge in order to open myself back up to the possibilities of being engaged in the workplace? So that's just the beginning of kind of thinking through, like, how do I determine what's next for me? Am I going to stay where I am? Am I going to go someplace else? Am I going to, start a side hustle?
Mhm.
Right. I mean, there's lots of different ways we can actually motivate ourselves to re-engage.
Yeah, and it could even be a step going into something that is not necessarily like a work-related type of a environment, that maybe you just need separation and time to heal and reflect, and maybe that's a good time to go off and do a volunteer
Hmm.
activity. It could be something where you're really dedicating yourself and, doing that for an extended period of time. Maybe you want to go and refresh your skill sets or your education and go and get a certification or a degree. Maybe you just want to take time and travel and explore, right? I mean, so many different ways that you can edify yourself and get enriched and reinvigorated. But the thing is it puts you into places now where it helps you think differently, gives you different perspective, helps you put an understanding into what's really important to me and what is it that I seek next that I want to pursue.
Mhm.
So don't feel trapped. Of course, take care of your finances. We don't want anybody to be putting themselves in a bad way that way. But think about it in a broad way that maybe you could dial it back. Maybe you could go into something part time while you're doing some other things that feel very gratifying to you, that are benefiting to where you want to go on your journey.
Mhm. Absolutely. And
So, and then if I could add in some additional thoughts here when we think about, what is it that we can do, and for leaders to really think about, I've got individuals, or I've got a team that is really in this space that is challenging, to how do you train your leaders? So if you're a leader of leader, what are you doing to train your directors, your managers, your supervisors to be more effective in their leadership, to be, showing adaptability, connectedness, relatedness, being able to show empathy. So we talked about these things back in the first episode. So definitely go back and revisit that. The other one is, again, to encourage open communication and feedback. And this might be a novel thing that, this hasn't been operating in, maybe in your organization or within your department or on your team, and get coaching on how to go about that. So it comes through in a genuine way, so that it's believable, so that you feel comfortable in your own skin, putting yourself out there. It is a space of vulnerability. That if it's something that really hasn't been done before, or hasn't been part of our company culture, to now put it out there, because you have to be genuine, you have to be vulnerable in order for employees to respond to it and take it seriously and be feeling supported and comfortable to engage into that. But make multiple attempts. So it could be things where maybe there's somebody within the team that you feel, gosh, they have a really good read on what's going on in the organization, what's going on the team. And I want to have an isolated chat with this person. Maybe it's something that you just raise awareness around at a team meeting and just bring up observations or things you're hearing or sensing. Yeah, I just have a feel about this. But you're inviting conversation.
mhm.
And again, look at it from multiple perspectives about how to approach this, and the feedback component, you seeking feedback at the org wide level. We want to hear feedback from all employees, but then we also want to support that feedback to continue to come through as you funnel down into the organization and refine that. So think about at the functional department level, at the team level, and then at the individual level too. And then for the organization, when we think about what can an organization do, is that revisit your mission and your values components and the messaging around that. Not only the messaging, but also the evidence that you have around how is leadership showing up and exemplifying these espoused values that we have and what our mission is. And is it still connected with what's meaningful or needed by the employee population? So if there's some sort of a gap that's occurring, that's something that needs to be addressed and talked through. So how do we, again, back from episode one, how do we contemporize our messaging? Maybe it's a time for a refresh. Maybe it's a time to scale. We might need to add a little bit more to it and be thoughtful and inclusive that way. Or it might be a time to just kind of rewrite the whole thing. That's okay. But it is a place as an organization. Let's step back, let's reflect, and let's look at these key components. The other one is to be promoting work life boundaries and allow employees to know that it's okay to do this, that it's okay to unplug. It's okay to not be accessible on weekends and in the evenings. It's okay to show up at this time and leave at this time. And leaders, you need to role model this. Staying at the office until 8, 9 o'clock at night, it gets nobody an extra badge or anything to that measure. It just shows that it could show maybe actually some other things that aren't working well, and people can have a different perspective and read on that. And the other piece for the organization that can be done is promoting mental health, mental awareness, and then also resources around that. So think about your employee resource groups, think about your EAP, think about any type of resourcing available through your benefit package that employees need to be aware of. And then how do you make this messaging available, not just narratively, but evidence? Can you put posters up and make it available? Could you send out flyers to employees? Other types of things. And as leaders, make sure that you're introducing this into team conversations too. Provide that reminder about these are the resources we have available, and even give examples about how you yourself have tapped into those resources. You don't have to share your story, but just help people know that it's very normal to engage with these types of resources and how they can be supportive and helpful.
Great summary. I mean, I think that's especially with organizations and how leaders can help in this situation, and regardless of who we reflect on, leaders, organizations, or the employee that is engaged is involved. Quiet quitting and the great detachment are symptom. It's a symptom of deeper workplace issues, of greater like evaluation needed both on the personal and the organizational level. And so therefore it's really an opportunity. So I mean, if you want to think about this, is not a negative, but it's like with every circumstance there's this opportunity, and it's an opportunity to reflect on what are the organizational values, like Brikkelle talked about, and how you're going to implement them. What are your own personal, like, career objectives and life objectives, and how do you want to go about reaching them? So take proactive steps to do these things, and along the way prioritize well-being and career satisfaction, so that you can be more engaged, right? Both people and organizations can be engaged, right? They can be engaged in what they do. So
100%.
yeah.
Yes, absolutely. We're so glad that you all tuned in and joined us for this conversation. And as always, we love to hear your comments and your thoughts, your questions. Any way that we can help support you, we're happy to do that. Just let us know. Let us know what you need or what you want. Also, we would love to hear more from you around what are some of the content or topic areas that you're really curious about, and to provide a reminder that our podcast is really focusing on helping people in their career, helping entrepreneurs, and helping people be successful in their aspects of life of how they choose to engage. But also, we want to throw some fun stuff in there because we have a lot of outside interests and hobbies and things like that. And so, it's about the spice of life too. So we want to hear that. Anything else to add, Victor, before we hit the outro music and boogie on out of here?
I think you should just hit that button and let's go.
Let's go.